It's been over a year since we did a full build quality analysis with one of the most compelling brands in the EV space, and that is Rivian. We did initial build quality inspections on the Rivian R1T and the R1S, which we have here today. And I gotta say, things have changed a lot with Rivian, and a lot for the better. I promised you guys in 2024, we're going to be doing reoccurring build quality analysis on vehicles that we've actually already done to see how companies have either improved or gotten worse as far as panel gaps, fit and finish, paint issues, paint defects, and everything like that. So I'm very excited to bring to you guys today a 2024 Rivian R1S quad motor. Welcome back to another out of spec detailing video here from Clear Detailing in Northern Colorado. Let's jump into it. Now, I think it's important on this channel that we do these reoccurring build quality videos, if not every year or something a little bit longer, to see how these cars are actually being built. The EV space changes so much, so rapidly, and so quickly. And one company that has impressed me, honestly, the most has been Rivian. Now, early Rivians, we went through a few different cycles of the Rivian brand. Now, when they first came out, I was completely and absolutely blown away with how they put these trucks together, trucks and SUVs together, with a package that felt like it was a hand-built, very well put together vehicle that was unbelievably solid. Then what I saw throughout working on these vehicles, last year alone, I think I detailed over 20 Rivians here at the shop. You know, that's spending 40 plus hours this far away from the paint and panel gaps and fit and finish. So I feel like I'm uniquely qualified to be able to kind of scrutinize these vehicles and show them in a little bit detailed light, if you will. Now, once Rivian started ramping production, what I was seeing was a lot of things that we were seeing with Tesla, and honestly still see with Tesla, of high production volume, slapping vehicles together and having panels not even close to aligned and stuff everywhere. It honestly started to feel like quite a bit of a mess. So early trucks, unbelievable. Production ramp, they really started to take a big nosedive in my personal opinion. But as of late, Rivian is getting these dialed in. I think they took a lot of criticism from videos like mine, as well as customers picking up their vehicles complaining about panel gaps and fit and finish. Now, I know a lot of you may say, the panel gap thing is just far overblown, nobody cares. I'm telling you, people do care. These videos really spark a lot of interest in folks, and it also gives them something to look at when they go pick up their vehicle to make sure we don't have panels touching, taking paint off of vehicles, making sure doors close, and latches that don't fall off your brand new $120,000 Cybertruck. Things like that. I've been on the Rivian forums and the Facebook pages of Tesla and Rivian and Lucid, and people really do care about panel gaps, fit and finish, and how well built their vehicle is. So before further ado, what we're going to be doing today is taking this R1S through a full exterior build quality analysis. I actually have a new meter that measures the panel gaps here, so I can show you in a more comprehensive way what the discrepancies are between the passenger side, the driver's side, or panels that are maybe not aligned perfectly. It really helps. But I gotta tell you guys, Rivian has listened to the people, and I just love that. I love their philosophy behind how they go through, they take constructive criticism, they get some bumps and bruises, and they fix it. That is the way you become a successful auto manufacturer. So big props to Rivian for changing a lot on their vehicles, listening to annoying folks like me and customers. I gotta tell you, I've had so many of these customers have small little discrepancies. They book a service appointment, gets fixed, they're happy as can be, and I think that's a great thing. We're also going to jump inside today, talk a little bit more about the fit and finish in there, a lot about the materials. I have more and more experience with these inside. I'll give some critiques in some areas that I'd like to see in maybe an upcoming facelift of the R1T and R1S, but share a lot of the really good. We're also going to be taking a paint meter to this vehicle and just seeing how Rivian's doing as far as their paint quality, making sure that it is consistent throughout the vehicle and not having 7 mils on one panel and 2 mils on another. We'll get into all that. We're not going to be doing a scratch look through here. This vehicle has 2,500 miles on it. It is a customer delivered vehicle, so do keep that in mind throughout this. But let's get started with exterior fit and finish. Jumping into it here. So first off, again, this is a quad motor R1S with the Ocean Coast interior and 21-inch road wheels. I absolutely love this spec. Rivian knocks it out of the park with their colors. I think they have such a unique color lineup, very different than the likes of something like Audi with a different shade of black, gray, and silver and white. It's so cool. And this is limestone, really one of my favorites here. Now, with these build quality analysis videos, one thing that I've done is I wanted to quantify, in person, panels may look different than they come through on camera. So I purchased one of these little tools. Now, this is a panel fitment guide. You'll see a bunch of little dashes and numbers on here. Essentially, what I'm going to do here is you put this little tool in here and you're gonna get a measurement on there. The nice thing with this is I can measure here, and then measure down here and see if there's any tolerance differences to figure out how these are actually put together. Now again, like I said, I have a lot of experience with Rivians here at the shop, spending hours and hours and hours staring at these things. So I do feel like I am very uniquely qualified to be able to look at these cars and scrutinize them with a very detailed and trained eye. And I will share with you some things that I've seen change over time, some issues that may arise as the car ages a little bit, as seals get broken in, as your front trunk moves up and down often. There's some definite things that I think still need to be dialed in, but man, you guys are going to be blown away with the differences, especially if you go back and watch the early builds of these trucks. So let's just start up here on the hood. Now, alignment here is not absolutely perfect. As you can see, my finger kind of dives down there, but I would say that's definitely acceptable and looks quite nice. Now here I can already see that the hood is sunken down just ever so slightly. And that's really one of the issues that I see a lot with Rivians. My brother-in-law, John, actually took delivery of a Rivian Blue R1S. His came in and I was like, dude, can I please do a build quality video on this? It looks absolutely perfect. Sure, no problem. And then a month and a half later, he brought it in to actually do the detail when we were going to do a video, and his hood had completely sunk. Like the gap here, it was perfectly flush and then all of a sudden sunk. And I asked him, what the heck happened to, the whole front trunk assembly? And he said, well, I was parked on somewhat of an incline. I opened it one day, went to close it, and it wouldn't latch. Now, one of the issues that I see with these is that this is such a huge, heavy piece, and you basically have two pistons pushing them up. I believe they're hydraulic over here, and they may start to push at slightly different size or pressures on each side and speed, and it kind of starts to contort this entire hood. They also have a ton of issues latching up here. Now, as of recently, it seems to be getting better, but again, this 2,500 mile one, I'm already seeing the hood is starting to sink, and I do expect that to get worse and worse over time. So let's take a measurement up here. We're at 5.5 millimeters, and up here, we're pushing right at 6. So honestly, pretty darn good throughout that. Now moving around here to the front, I am seeing that this rubber seal is kind of poking down here. Very odd from what I've seen on all Rivians. This has not been extremely common. What I am glad to see though is the alignment here. It definitely looks better. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better than early ones. Now, as you can see there, that gap is almost 8.5 millimeters. I would say that is far, far too big for a panel gap on a vehicle. Let's measure this side over here. Yep, 8.5 as well. So that to me seems a little large, especially when you look down here at the charge port. You can see how thick this gap down here all the way is. Let's measure up in this area. Again, so right at a little under 5.5 millimeters. Back here, we're a little bit more at 6 millimeters. And then you come up here and you are at about 9.5, nearly 10 millimeters. This gap is quite large. That's a pinky finger for reference there. I don't really love that. That definitely screams to me this whole hood assembly needs an alignment on here. What is interesting though is this looks pretty decent in here, and it's also very flush. So that side has sunken down, this side has created a gap bigger here, but it's nice and flush all the way through this particular fender and hood area. Very, very interesting stuff. Now, charge ports on the Rivian, I've seen a ton of issues. Now, with this, of course, being powered, let me see, probably need to unlock it. Proximity, the key is in my pocket here. So I'm gonna unlock this. Okay. So I'm curious to see if this one has the Rivian wiggle. It sure does. That to me is not the greatest. And I've complained about this multiple times. I've shown customers this, and we've actually had one fall off a vehicle before. So this to me definitely doesn't scream quality or build quality in any regard. Let's close this up here. Nice actuation inside, but I'm definitely noticing very tight gapping here. This looks fantastic all the way through, nice and flush, and then definitely a little bit larger over here. So to put that into perspective, we're gotta flip this over right at about 5 millimeters, and then here 2.5 millimeters. So that gap there is double the thickness up here. And you can see how different all of this is in this particular area. Same with here, so that's about 3 millimeters. So I'd like to see some adjustment here. Now, my personal preference, there's nothing wrong with a charge port that you have to push in and open, completely mechanical instead of electronic. It's my personal opinion. You may totally disagree. Now here, sorry about the light, it's kind of blinding right now, but you can see this rubber seal on this side is doing the same exact thing on this side. It should not look like that whatsoever. Now the front end of the Rivian, one of my favorite front ends on any vehicle. It's very, very pronounced that it is a Rivian. I love that they're carrying this over to R2 and R3 and R3X and all of those. Let's shut off the lights here. Nice responsive key. Speaking of the key, you notice we have a new key on here with some white emblems on there. And this is nice. This is something that Rivian has been listening to their customers about. We've seen keys come up from aftermarket, in the aftermarket world, making them white. It's a little bit easier to find, a little bit easier to see. One thing that I love here though is how perfect all of this is on the hood. This basically arch, so many trucks and R1Ss I've seen have not been perfect. This side though, I'm noticing a little bit of difference. Notice here how tight this is, and then very much opens up. So again, I think this hood needs some serious adjustment. One of my biggest complaints about this, of course, is when you pop this open, you only have one tie down here in the center. So it gives a lot of vibration. I've had one that I was driving down the road, very windy day, 85 miles an hour down the highway, and the hood latch actually popped open. And I think if they would come in here, have a latch maybe in this area, same over here, it would solve a lot of those issues. So it's one of those things I really think they need to improve on. Now, front trunk plastics, they have massively gotten dialed in. A lot of these, I've opened them up from brand new vehicles, and these weren't even sort of attached. Now this one, you can see a little bit of movement in there. I think that's completely fine. I just don't want to come in here with a brand new vehicle that the customer literally brought from the Rivian service center here and have none of these even clipped in. That's definitely not a good look. One thing that I think I can actually put my name on that Rivian listened to me about is this particular panel. Now, in early Rivians, there was essentially a cut here. So this was 3 separate pieces, and this was held in by one clip here. Now, with them making this entire piece, it doesn't turn anymore. Maybe Max can throw in a little clip in that in our early build quality videos. There was one clip here, when I would clean in here, you would touch it, it would spin, and all of a sudden you'd shut it, and you just have this panel hanging out like this. Really, really looked terrible. But again, talking about the struts here, you can see you have 2 massive pistons over here, likely hydraulic, of course, and those, if they start to move pressure at different angles, I think that's how these hoods are buckling. Now let's see here. Definitely a little bit of movement, Not even close to as bad as something like the Model S and Model X. Those things are like literal kites. So let's close this down. Their actuation on here has gotten so much better. Honestly, one of the areas on the Rivians that I've never had complaints about was this particular situation down here. So where the tow hooks are, where the fog lights are, this whole gloss back, every single time, these are nearly perfectly put together. I've never really seen issues down in this particular area, so good props to Rivian there. Now moving down the side to the driver's side front fender here. This has always been an area of issue for Rivian, and no exception here, but things have gotten a lot better. If you'll notice, this body line definitely does not run straight here. It seems to me like this needs to get pushed in, and definitely the fender hanging out a little bit more than the hood. What I'm glad to see though, look at this line all the way down. So let's take some measurements here. Let's go right in the middle. So little under 3.5 millimeters, 3.5 millimeters, 3.5 millimeters. That is perfectly straight. But again, remember, this is sitting up and a little bit down. And then look down here, the door is actually sticking out a little in this particular area. Now again, I know this is nitpicky, but I think a lot of people do pay attention to this. I really never think you should have a leading edge of the backwards panel sticking out. I'd rather have it sucked in more like this. Can catch rocks there. It's also bad for wind noise. Anything like that is going to create noise and vibrations in there, and I really don't think that's a good situation. A-pillars on the Rivians have changed tremendously. In early days, we could actually see these clips in here. They looked like dents, but obviously outward dents. They were like basically little hills on this thing. They have absolutely dialed this in, and I'm so happy to see that. Look at the alignment here on this A-pillar to the whole door panel assembly. Looks absolutely fantastic. Nothing's sticking out. All the rubber seals look perfect in here. One area I have seen to be an issue on these is this up here. This one does not seem to have that issue. A lot of times these are sticking up a little bit, and they can actually cause quite a bit of noise whistling when you're driving down the road in the wind. And there's been some serious flex in these. This one feels extremely nice. The alignment here looking quite good. I will say this gap's definitely a little bit bigger, so that's around 5 millimeters there. And then down here, we're looking right at 4. So not perfectly aligned, but I would say more than acceptable. This area is an area I talk about all the time on vehicles. Every manufacturer struggles getting these aligned up. So basically, the doors are a solid metal piece, and typically they have a little ridge here that the piano black or whatever trim, chrome, matte black, or gloss black in this situation, they snap onto there and kind of sit there on basically a pinch weld. Now, a lot of the times they're very wonky. This has gotten so much better on Rivians. I used to see them kind of popped up in this area. Feels really good. Now, the alignment here, pretty spot on. Not much to complain about. Looks fantastic. Now, Rivian has had quite a few issues with door handles in my impression. They've had some paint issues with them where they're literally a completely different color, completely different metallic. Now, for example, it may have been on a Red Canyon one where it's more of a red-orange paint, and then the handles looked bright orange, like not even close. I do see a little bit of difference. You guys aren't gonna be able to see it on camera here. This is definitely more yellow than up here. Very interesting, and it's something that I see quite a bit. But the alignment all the way through here, how flush that sits, fantastic. Let's look at the back one here. Same thing, I would say it's a little bit crooked back here. If I'm being ultra nitpicky, seems like it needs to come back up, but honestly, really no complaints. Now, front door to rear door alignment. This is perfection. So happy with that. Tight panel gap. Let's get you a little measurement on here. Under 2.5 millimeters. Here, 3.5, so not perfect. That's a perfect example of how your eyes can trick you. If I'm standing right here, it looks perfect all the way down. but it's actually not when we measure it. Now I do see this door sticking out ever so slightly, again, being quite nitpicky. Now this has been an area where Rivian struggled a little bit with this gap, so that's right at 5 millimeters. You'll see on the other side what I'm talking about with that. And this here, 5 millimeters. Love that. Looks nice and flush, looks even. That's an area that I've kind of pushed them on and trying to improve. This area has never been perfect. Down here, look at the alignment. Love that. Same down here. Nice and flush. This is what I'm talking about. Rivian is really getting these things dialed in. Now again, this one's not perfect, but as you can see, like this gap here, how it doesn't perfectly line up on that body line, that is so nitpicky, but we do need to point that out. Make sure you guys know and understand that. Up here, along the gloss back, amazing. This all looks, wow. I mean, the amount of panels that are going together here. So you have a door, you have a full structural fender here, you have a plastic piece that goes in, another plastic piece on the door, an aluminum rail, another one. It looks literally perfect all the way through. That gapping is fantastic through there. What's also fantastic is this. Yet again, these doors fit perfectly flush here. Let's get you a little measurement. So I can do it upside down. 3.5, 3.5, maybe slightly over 3.5. That looks phenomenal. Nice and flush in there, nice tight gapping. So we have 3.5 here, 2.5 up here. I think that's perfectly acceptable. Another area Rivian's really struggled in the past, but have much improved, is this plastic rear fender plastic. This used to, well, it still does. It definitely moves here. You can see it not clipped in. They need to add a clip in here. The nice thing though, is this is sitting much more flush. I've seen these be really far out of alignment, and I think this one may be a little bit as well. As I continue to move it, if I push it back in, it looks good there. But definitely like to see little things like that get tightened up. But this, just looking at it here, so much better. Yet again, another area Rivian has struggled on, but gotten really nice, is down here. I have seen gaps down here that are literally, I can almost stick a finger in, where the bumper is sticking out. This is how it should look. Now up here, you can see it's slightly diving down, getting a little bit of a gap in here, but it's much better than having this huge open gap in that particular area. Even look here how the bumper aligns. This is really nice fit and finish. You can just tell they are really starting to get these dialed in and really working on making sure their cars are going out quite nice. Yet again, let's talk about another area Rivian has struggled with, and one area they're still struggling with, this rear cap. Now, we have had some press vehicles to where the gapping here was horrible, like probably a 1/4 inch this was sitting down. Now what you will notice here is this cap is basically made out of plastic, and to me it looks like it kind of shrinks and deforms with heat and cooling. So up here, this is perfectly flush. As I move down here, you can see that is a huge gap there. It's, I don't know, a 1/4 inch maybe. So yeah, about 1.5 millimeters. I don't know what that is. You guys will definitely let me know, but it definitely seems off. But these little horns, as we've called them, this looks better. It's definitely not perfect, as you can see, but much better than I've seen in the past. So that's very good. You can see this one here looks even better. What's not good is those little plastic pieces up there. So this has basically, sorry, it's hard to film up here. It's very tall, but you can see this is sticking up. Now the customer actually pointed this out when he picked up the car. Rivian's response to this was, well, you see our glass roof here, or the whole roof line, has this ever so gradual slope. The problem with these is these plastic inserts here are actually flat. So they all stick up like that. To me, that's one of those things, if you guys know it's not right, you need to fix it. That to me is unacceptable, or need to add another clip and bend that thing in to where it fits properly, because that's definitely not perfect. Now back here, rear tailgate, again, with this cap has somewhat been a mess. to where they sit too low. I've seen Rivians that come in brand new, fresh off the lot, and they have paint missing here because this panel is contacting that panel. Same on this side, I've seen it. Now, a few things going on with this particular one. So let's look here. Very, very flush gapping. You can see this lines up very, very nice. Let's take some measurements. That's probably 2 millimeters. In my personal opinion, probably a little too tight. I like to see really tight tolerances. My thought though, this is gonna move over time and that may make contact. So I'll definitely let my customer know that. This in here, right at 2.5. So definitely a little bit more gapping. And then this lower trunk piece is actually sticking out and is sticking in there. Definitely not perfect, but definite improvements over time. Now let's measure over here. 5.5 millimeters down there. This one's a little hard to do. Just under 5.5 millimeters. I would say nears makes no difference. 4.5 on this side. And 5.5 down there. So definitely a little bit of adjustment needed, but not terribly bad. Now the light bar here, holy gap. This thing is pretty massive. When we're getting into 8.5, probably almost 9 millimeters there, in all honesty, a little too thick in my personal opinion. Now this side is barely 6, so definitely 3 millimeters off between that light bar. I'm not sure exactly why these are always so off. I mean, to me, you would think they would go in the same exact position, but it seems to me the light bar is pushed this way, and then this tail light looks like it's perfectly lined up there. Let's look at this one. This tail light looks like it's slightly inset, so some very weird stuff going on there. But let's open this up. Maybe. Sometimes these are very unresponsive and they just kind of die. Here we go. Or they go to sleep. Why are you not opening? Okay. I don't know what's going on there. Okay. Sure. So keep moving on here. Let's see if this will drop down. One of my only complaints back here is that should be powered on these $80,000+ rigs. It should be like a Range Rover. This actuation and that bounce to me, that should be dampened or at least powered open, power close. My friend Nick has a BMW X5 plug-in hybrid that is fully opens automatically and then closes automatically. Just think it's one of those things that'd be nice to have. But let's see if this button works now. Will it actually close? Now it's opening. That was a little strange. So one thing I do notice with Rivians is they fall asleep quite often when I'm working on them and they become completely unresponsive. There's times where I'll sit here, and you guys have probably all seen this with the Fisker Ocean. The Rivian's not quite as bad, it's been getting better, but I'll sit here. I'm hitting unlock. It's still not unlocking. There it goes. That to me is one of those things, it's a little ridiculous. Like, it should unlock on the first try. Now Tesla has this problem too. Phone key is an absolute disaster half the time. But I'm just saying, if you have a physical key fob, this should definitely get dialed a little bit more. Nice lock there. So you see, the car actually fell asleep there. And I have this all the time when I go to open this, when I go to unlock it, when I go to undo the front trunk. Even if the car is unlocked, it takes time for those to open. It does get quite annoying. And I think your experience, you leave this thing in the garage, you're carrying something heavy, you're trying to open this and the car's just not on. And you're like, okay, that's a little frustrating for sure. Let's take some measurements up here and we'll compare it to the other side. So right at about 5.5 there, very tight tolerance in this area. Like, that's gotta be under 2 millimeters. But then down here, we're 6.5, so 4 millimeters difference from here to here. Definitely would like to see that dialed in slightly more. Let's check over here. Quite a large gap here. I can't even get in there. That's probably 7.5 in that particular area. And this is quite a bit bigger at, 4 millimeters there. So still little incremental things, but I gotta say, looking at this truly in person, this really looks nice and you don't really notice the difference up here all that much. I would say on this particular side, Yeah, this definitely looks tight. It actually looks like it's sitting underneath this silver piece if I'm standing back here. So would like to see that dialed in, but not too terribly bad. Now, the silver aluminum trim, they've definitely worked on that. I've touched these before and it just sounded so plasticky and so cheap. Now, I do know most people don't go around knocking on these things, but I'm one of those weirdos that do. That feels extremely solid now. Way, way better. Good improvement there. Now, one thing I do want to point out is this aluminum trim is not sitting flush in this particular area. You can see a large gap and it's touching up here. I'd like to see that pushed in. Can definitely feel it with my finger. Definitely not perfect, but what is perfect, look at the alignment here. Fantastic. Door sitting perfectly flush in that particular area, even down here. The tolerances are getting so much better. What I do see on this though, a little bit bigger gap up here compared to down here. So let's take a little measurement. So that's right at 4 millimeters. That's got to be 1.5 to 2.5 millimeters probably. So very, very tight. But again, look at this particular area. This that normally is sitting, I've seen these things sitting like this half the time, and you have this huge gap. This still sits good. I just still think they need a clip there. And as you can see, a little bit of gap there, not too terribly bad though. Down here, this area looks perfect. Now there are some clips in here. As you can see, I just moved that and now it actually looks perfect. Where it kind of clicks in like that, that to me needs to get fixed. I've had these sticking out like 1/4 inch. So I think that definitely should get worked on. But this one now looks good after I finagled it. Again, down here, fantastic. Really, really happy with that. Up here, let's see if I can see anything on here. And I'm immediately drawn to this massive gap over here. Look at this bad boy. That is 8 millimeters, maybe 8.5. And then I come up here and that is nothing. So the other side, way better. This to me is traditional Rivian of what I've seen in the past, and I really don't like it. This should be equal with this. Should also be equal with the door. You can see if I'm standing right over it, look at the difference there of where that actually starts. So that whole piece needs to slide back. I don't know how to do that, but what I do know how to fix is this particular area. So this plastic molding, you can definitely see sticking out like substantially. There's one screw under there, unbolt it, push that in, tighten it, fixes that. So I will be doing that on this particular Rivian just for my customer because I'm OCD like that. It's just unbolting a screw, a couple threads, you don't even take it all the way out, push that in, boom, perfect. Nice, back to normal. Now here I'm noticing this rear door sticking out a little bit. That's being a little bit nitpicky, but again, up here looks perfect. That rear door right there sticking out ever so slightly. So I'd like to see that improved. I do know this particular vehicle did have one of the doors, or maybe two of them, realigned. So I may be seeing why the tolerances are better here. But again, going back to it, they seem to be fixing this stuff quite a bit. Now I want you to look at this light right here. Maybe hard to see, it may have to come over here. This is the traditional Rivian dent right here. They all have this. I've had multiple customers point that out to me. They're like, my brand new car's got a dent in it. And I'm like, they all have that. I don't know what happens in this particular area. You can really see right there that ripple. Very, very odd. They all seem to have that on R1Ss. I'm not sure why. That's just one of those quirks and features maybe, as Doug DeMuro would say. But yeah, definitely a little bit odd. Door handles look fantastic here and here. Really, really impressive stuff. Now this gap looks fantastic, except for it definitely looks bigger up here than down here, but nice and flush. Let me take some measurements on this because this is kind of tripping my eyes out. 4 millimeters. Ooh, definitely not perfect. Yeah, so it's weird. I'm looking at it at this angle and then I move to this angle and that gap looks huge. That looks really tight, but you can see definitely by using our measurement tool, that's not perfect. So my thoughts on the R1S here. Actually, before I do that, let's talk about the roof glass. Up here, they have made serious improvements. can see how flush that sunroof is. Has not been like that in the past. Let's look back here. Perfectly flush, perfectly flush, perfectly flush. Nailed the glass. Pumped with that. And that has not been the case in the past. So very, very impressive stuff. Also love that Rivian has basically 3 accessory rails up there. I still have yet to see anybody, other than on photos, have 3 bars on their Rivian. I think it's just so cool. But I gotta tell you guys, although this one isn't perfect, I would say this is within reasonable expectations of a new vehicle. My Tesla Model 3 over here, absolute disaster compared to this. I've had every single door on that one aligned multiple times. My trunk lid's weird on it. It's really, really frustrating on those vehicles. But I got to say, I have to give huge kudos here to Rivian for actually going in and really trying to improve their vehicles. They're not perfect yet. This is still a young company trying to get this figured out, but I want to give them kudos and want to give them credit for listening to folks and actually fixing things and actually trying to make their vehicles go in and be well put together. Now, I have to also give a shout out to Rivian service. I've had multiple customers, they watch these videos, they bring their brand new Rivian in and they go, hey, if you wouldn't mind, will you go through and inspect my vehicle? If you see anything that's alarming, let me know. We've done some videos on those vehicles. White R1T comes to mind. That like every single panel to me needed adjustment. He took it in, he showed them the video, they fixed all of it, didn't cost him a thing. They went in, they fixed it, and he's happy as can be. And I've heard nothing but good experiences from Rivian service. So huge kudos to them. So now, exterior, much improvement. One thing that hasn't changed much is the interior, and that's a very, very good thing. Rivian from day one, in my personal opinion, has had one of the best interiors in any EV on the entire market, probably let alone the entire car market. It's rugged, it's luxurious, has really unique materials, really unique design, and most importantly, wears incredibly well. So let's jump inside and talk about some really nice things about the inside and some improvements that I would like to see. We're not gonna spend too much time inside here. You guys have all seen Rivians and we've done build quality analysis videos on them. They are incredible. They're really, really impressive. Now, a few things I want to point out. This is from earlier videos. One of the biggest being the wood and the little cracks, as I call them, that they had. So in this particular area, from what I understand, Rivian is actually doing this on purpose to give some relief to the wood. Now, my personal opinion, I don't like the wood. Now, I'm a detailer. What annoys me is anytime I need to clean this area up here, this area down here, is this grabs a microfiber towel and then it starts leaving lint, and then you wipe it again and it leaves more lint. I can already see some hanging out here. This is on every single Rivian that I see. Because this is an open pore, it's a nightmare. I've also had quite a few customers ask me now, how do I get chips out of these? How do I recolor it? Because they have had some issues with that. So my personal opinion, although I think the wood looks cool, functionally for me, I personally would go for the vegan dash or the vegan material there instead of the wood. It's my personal opinion, and then let's move on. Now, one area I have seen an issue in the past with Rivians is this. So this dashboard here is obviously one piece. When it comes to here, this metal area seems to look like it gets kind of pushed up, and then you have a giant section here. This particular one looks fantastic, and I hope to see that on vehicles as they get more and more produced, that's not an issue. But I've definitely seen it to where this is pinching and it pushes the dash up, leaves a very weird gap. The interior on this to me is almost perfection, other than the wood and this. This material, this kind of anodized chrome look, maybe a dark chrome you'd call it, absolute freaking nightmare to clean. It streaks, it shows fingerprints. It's like having a Cybertruck that you're touching all the time. And believe me, people touch this area all the time. It's on all the high contact area points. You have it here. I've also had customers who wear rings, of course, and this just gets absolutely beat to all heck there with the rings. It's a basically plastic material, I believe, and then they put like this chrome coating over it, very similar to this. This is actually not metal. This is plastic. You can literally see it here with the aluminum finish over it. So I think those areas could get improved over time. Personally, don't love that. I also don't love that these areas down here, they can pop out a little bit and they become a little bit sharp. So few little nitpicks there. One thing that I see often on Rivians is this. Now, let me move this seat up and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. In the forums, you see a lot of folks complaining about this kind of buckle in the seat, and they go, I cannot believe Rivian gave me my car like this. It looks terrible. What happens is they get in, they kind of angle the seat position up a little bit, and this is basically a hinge joint. So if I move this back down, goes to absolutely perfect again. Now I don't have this issue because I want the seat as low as possible, as flat as possible, and the seat kind of raked up a little bit. I like that more performance driving oriented seating style. It's my personal preference there, but yeah, I definitely think that's an area that's quite funny to hear people complain about, but I do understand that it definitely doesn't look good if your seat goes in that angle. One area that I absolutely hate more than anything on this particular vehicle is these side sills. Now, I want you to notice here, all of these rocks that go in here, they are almost impossible to get out, except I found a way. Now, a Rivian is an off-roady vehicle. You're meant to go on adventures out in the mountains and have rocks and dirt and grit. And then they go and make an area that has this huge, basically, area that just catches absolutely everything. The amount of pebbles that I see in here when I'm detailing these cars is truly unbelievable. Now, the only way to get them out, instead of just shoving them down there farther so you can't see them, is you have to take this plastic panel out. Now, this one, we'll see if I need to do it. Basically, this center section pops out. There's 4 bolts on the back of this. Pull it off, vacuum out all of that, wipe it down with a towel, put it back on. That would drive me nuts as a Rivian owner because I'm one of those guys. I go in and vacuum my car every week. This just gets absolutely beat to heck. Every time you jump in here, your foot goes in that area right there, and it's really, really frustrating to deal with. And I definitely have had a lot of customers go, oh, you left a pebble right there. Why couldn't you get that out? The only other way to get that out is literally to take a plastic pry tool and try and pop them out. So frustrating. But the interior on this, I have to say, the use of materials is second to none. The design language, second to none. I think Rivian knocked it out of the park. Even the back seat looks fantastic here. Now, another one of those funny things, if you have a Rivian R1S here, and I've seen this on the forums a lot, you notice how the seat is kind of straight up right now? Well, that's the natural position it goes into the first time. Problem with that is when you put this down, now you have the weirdest angle on your armrest ever. So the only way to fix that is to put the seat back to where it should sit. But if you have somebody sitting in the 3rd row and need more space up here, you have to sit like this, and then this is your armrest area. That, to me, it should just be able to click in right there, but it doesn't. It just falls. So I think that should be one thing that needs to get fixed on upcoming vehicles. Also, this 2nd row, I've complained about it enough. Not going to touch on it in this. It's very, very annoying to deal with, especially one-handed, especially if you have kids in your arms and you're trying to do this and you're having to shove that back, and now it's here, and then you have to go here, and then now you have to tilt the seat back. It's not optimized for families, in my personal opinion. This 2nd row needs some refinement there. But materials, blown away with them. I have to tell you guys about the vegan leather in this. Personally, hate the word vegan leather. It's an absolute annoyance to me. This is a synthetic leather material. Now, my personal opinion as a professional detailer, much prefer this over leather. So much easier to clean. And in my personal opinion, Rivian makes the best vegan leather out of any manufacturer out there. My friend Kyle Connor, of course, that runs the Out of Spec Reviews channel, has a forest edge interior on his R1T. He beats the crap out of that thing. He's constantly on road trips, hauling, just flying down the road, eating his Starburst, having his very sugary Starbucks drink, spilling it all over the interior. And while he does get it very dirty and kind of lets it go too long, I come in here, clean it, and it literally comes back to brand new. He also has 3 huge dogs that he'll put in the back of his R1T. Their nails don't scratch this. It's truly impressive how much development went into these seats, and they really, really make a difference. Very, very impressed with the material. One thing I do want to gripe about, and one thing that I'd like to see, and this is a personal opinion. If you disagree, that's fine. I just want to give my personal opinion here. When I opt for an Ocean Coast interior, which would be my preference, I don't want a white headliner. Yes, it does make it brighter and airy. To me, it's just too bright and it doesn't match right. I would much rather have the Black Mountain all black headliner. And I also think it's weird if you get a green one, you get a green headliner. It's like a lot of green. It's like you're literally sitting in a forest inside. It's just, to me, I wish they would leave all black headliner or give you maybe an option, even put $500 on there to swap a white headliner in there. I know it would make manufacturing more complicated, but I wish that they would give you the option. The other thing I'd wish they'd give you the option in is the airbag cover. The really only reason I maybe wouldn't get Ocean Coast is the headliner and that. I think it looks so tacky. It's so bright in your eyes when you're driving down the road. Just put a black one there. And of course, the Forest Edge has a green one. So I think it's just one of those things. Now, one of my least favorite materials in here, we definitely need to talk about, and that is this. It is fingerprint heaven. Look over here and you can see how nasty it looks. The other side's even worse. Maybe you can see it there. Kind of hard to reach over there. You can go to the passenger side. It is a pain in the butt. Now, I have a lot of customers, of course, that are married, that wear rings on their left hand, unlike me on my right hand. They wear metal rings. This area gets hammered all the time. So it's like Rivian decided, let's put the most complicated to clean material in the highest impact areas possible, where you close your door, where you rest your hand and use the buttons here, and then in the center console where your hand naturally lays. That to me, a little annoying. I do aesthetically like the look, but I have yet to see a customer's Rivian come in and that be completely fingerprint free. Look at this side. It's nasty. It's literally like having a Cybertruck and you're in the interior. It is a pain in the butt to clean. Now, one other area I'd like to see improved is the cup holder here. That rattles all the time. And this one is especially loose here. So I'd like to see that improved. I don't love all the space down here. I like a cockpit feel more or less. So I'd like to just have a deep center console there that I can store whatever. It's not flying over the sides there, my personal opinion, but really, really impressive interior here by Rivian. Just the materials everywhere. I mean, I love that you even have nice materials down here, not super cheap plastic. This to me makes a lot of sense to have plastic. Again, this particular area drives me nuts as a professional detailer, but it's so rugged, it's so luxurious, and it's minimalistic, but it's also not in ways like just the way they've done the compass yellow accents here. You have a little coat hook, type C, little anodized accents, even the yellow accents up there on the door handles, or the grab handles. They have absolutely nailed the interior. I really, those are very nitpicky things. This drives me nuts. They need to fix that, but very, very impressive stuff. Lastly, that we've gone through the exterior fit and finish, the interior fit and finish and materials. I want to talk about the paint. So for the detailing nerds, this is your time. Now, this is, of course, a paint meter. If you've watched these videos before, you may have seen this. What this does is basically sends a signal from the metal tip of this down to the metal and shoots a measurement back. This measures basically your primer, your base coat, your color coat, your clear coat. And what I look for here is consistency. I also look for the amount of paint. So for example, when I'm measuring this, I'm measuring it in mils. Now we are measuring door panel gaps in millimeters. This is mils, completely different. So for example, 4 mils is roughly the thickness of a sheet of printer paper. So that's, you have to consider, that is your primer, your base coat, color coat, clear coat. Very, very thin if you think about it. Paper thin, if you will. So let's just take some measurements here. I'm anxious to see this over time. 6.38 mils, 5.65, and 6. So getting a little bit better. Now what I've traditionally seen on Rivians is like 4 mils down here, and this area just has a ginormous amount of paint, like 7, sometimes 8 mils. It's crazy. I don't know why this area is painted so much more, but this one definitely seems a little bit better. Now, typically as a professional detailer, what I like to see is between 4 to 6 mils, but also have consistency. So I don't want to see, 4 mils here and 8 mils here. Not that that's what that number is, but just want to quickly go around here and get a little bit better idea of their paint consistency. Yeah, definitely still a little all over the place, for sure. One area that they've always struggled getting a lot of paint on for whatever reason is up here. I mean, I've seen these in like low 2 areas. That's 3.13. That to me is a little too low, and 3.08. So still struggling there, Rivian. Gotta have more paint on these. Now it's not as bad as Lucid's paint with like literally 2 mils of paint to where I'm worried about breathing on it and paint not being there. So yeah, same thing going on as normal. Kind of all over the place here, but I'm just kind of reading these in my head. I'm just curious. Now, up here, what I want to show you, we have clear bra on the whole front end of this. That's going to read 12.63 mils. So I would say, again, not the most consistent paint, but I do want to give some kudos here. Their paint has gotten a lot better. And what I mean by that is how they finish the paint. Now, early Rivians, it was really, really funny. They would have these sanding spots all over them. So essentially those sanding spots would come from a dust nib. Now, a dust nib, honestly, there's not any on here, so that's why I'm explaining this to you. Rivians would come in and they would get little dirt particles in them. And essentially it would create this little pimple on the paint. And what they would do to get rid of those so that it didn't look like a pimple, they'd come in with a little sander about this large, quickly zap it, and then polish it out. The funny thing is they weren't polishing them. So a lot of the times, like on Kyle's Rivian R1T before he wrapped it, it had these like polka dots all over it of these dry sanding spots where it had the dust nibs on there. They went in and sanded it. And to me, it was just like, that's one of those things, guys, you cannot do. And I gotta say, as of recently, they fixed a lot of that. This has no paint nibs on it. I've already walked around this car, doesn't have sanding marks on it. So kudos, Rivian. Very, very impressive with getting your paint a little bit more dialed in. Still like to see consistency throughout a panel be a little bit better, but I think that is something that they can still get improved. They've improved so much on these vehicles, and yeah, I mean, to me, it's really one of the most compelling vehicles out there. Like, this is often now compared to the Kia EV9. So I'm in kind of the market as of right now for a 3-row SUV. We have 3 golden retrievers now. Our ID4, my 2 Model 3s don't really cut it for hauling them around. So I either want to get an R1S or an EV9. Those are kind of in my price range. And I gotta say, I love the EV9, but it doesn't even come close to the interior of the R1S. But on the flip side, EV9's way bigger. But this to me just feels like a more premium, a more sorted vehicle. And on top of that, I don't have to go deal with a Kia dealership. I'd much rather deal with Rivian. Their service people are truly impressive. Like, we've had a lot between my customers, between Kyle. Kyle may get some special treatment here and there. Yes, I do understand that. But even talking with my customers, they're thrilled with it. The way they fix things, the diagnosing of vehicles, and getting vehicles in. Now, they have had some problems in the past. I will tell you this, especially here in Colorado where we have a ton of Rivians, getting quite booked out. So I've had customers that are like My hood is literally touching my fender and they can't get me in for 2.5 months. So that's not ideal, but it has been getting better. Again, these are growing pains of a new company, but I have to give them credit where credit's due here. They made a phenomenal first product and they've iterated it and made it better and better. So I'm very, very impressed with that. I think they still have a little ways to go on getting these totally dialed in, but in my personal opinion, totally acceptable with how this is delivered. I would maybe have a few panels adjusted and I would have no issues taking it into Rivian service and having them adjusted. So big shout out to Rivian. Keep working on it. I'm very anxious to see their next product lineup in a few years, R2, R3. Curious to see because those are going to be more mass market than their flagship R1 product. So thanks so much for joining us on another out of spec detailing video. We'll see you in the next one soon. Bye-bye.